We are now live. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining this live stream. Me, Peter Sweden, and our special guest today, Luai, I believe your name is pronounced. I'm not sure if I pronounced it correctly. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me.
Excellent. And so Luai is a migrant to Sweden from Yemen, I believe, and he is living in the hotspot of Malmö, where there is a lot of things that has been going on. And, well, I think it's just probably best to let Luai talk about how the situation is like and how we ended up in Sweden, why you came to Sweden. Do you want to tell the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll start off with my family. My mother is a human rights activist, a feminist activist in the Middle East. She was forced to they forced her to get married at the age of 8. And that's what started her fight against, Islamism and the crazy imams. So she took off her scarf and she refused to get married. She started, and then she educated herself and started fighting against Islamic extremism. And she ended up starting her own feminist organization and fighting for women who get murdered or get violated for getting raped, because we do not have a court system that supports women, but rather shames them and even puts them in jail for getting for getting raped. So like my mom would visit the women's prisons and speak to the women and bring them lawyers and etc. So because of my mom's human rights activism and feminist activism, we've gotten a lot of death threats. But in 2013, we received a death threat from Al-Qaeda, which is the main terrorist organization in Yemen. And during that time, I was still a revolution activist that fights for secularism, change, stop, reading the Quran so literally, but you couldn't say that. You couldn't say stop reading the Quran in Yemen. If you mention any criticism about the Quran, you get the death penalty. So what you could do instead...
There is blasphemy laws in Yemen.
Absolutely. The slightest thing, like even if you question the legitimacy of any word in the Quran, if you say maybe this sentence, so like even the most horrific sentences, like strike the infidels in their necks. If you say that this is a bad verse, we should not read it. If you say that and 4 people hear you and testify in front of the court, you get killed. So you kind of have to look at Quran and Islam and say, no, just focus on the beautiful parts, and you couldn't criticize the Quran. So the Al-Qaeda threatened us, and after the revolution, I applied to this Olof Palme Center, had a human rights activism training and lectures. So I was invited to come in and just have a speech, but then my family told me you can't come back because of the Al-Qaeda threat is serious. We've always had threats, but Al-Qaeda was like the cherry on top. And I wasn't going to come to Sweden, but then I thought about the only thing that made me change my mind was my sexual identity, was that, I couldn't be who I really was in Yemen. I mean, you couldn't even fight for women's rights in in Yemen without getting, death threats for it. So imagine trying to live your life as a minority that there's a death penalty for that in Yemen as well. So I thought I would come to Sweden and fight for women's rights in the Middle East and all these rights in Sweden. But then I come here and I realized that Sweden is even more retarded than Yemen. Because Sweden has come such a long way into becoming this beautiful secular country that it is. And what it's doing, it's inviting terrorism here. It's inviting this misogynistic ideology and hugging it and pointing to, and looking at anybody that criticizes it and says that you're a fascist, Nazi, white supremacist. So it just pisses me off so much. And it's why I'm on YouTube, on Twitter, and trying to say that it's not about race, it's not about white or black, it's about this religion that is making us Arabs so regressive and so oppressive to women and minorities. So anybody that wants to call anyone racist for criticizing Islam, they could go ahead. Yeah. So and
because I understand you're gay yourself, and homosexuality is illegal in Yemen. Am I correct?
yes, Yemen is one of the 9 countries that has the death penalty for homosexuality.
Interesting. So you came to Sweden then to kind of get away from that, from the threat of the Yemen government and from the Al Qaeda threat.
Yeah.
And you come here to Sweden, and you come to Sweden, and what do you find? Because you're in Malmö. Malmö is known to be a place where a lot of interesting things have been happening. Right. And by the way, I'm going to post your Twitter link in the chat here so people can go follow you on Twitter.
Right. Thank you so much.
On Twitter at JustLuai. I'll have the link there in the chat.
Thank you. Well, my experience of Malmö is that Malmö is not a Swedish city. People are happy about the multiculturalism, but Malmö is nothing Swedish. Because let me just say that when I came to Sweden, I thought that people who come here are like me, secular. They love Western culture. They want to adapt Western culture. Fine, they can come with their shawarma. They can come with their falafel. They can come with the food. They can come with the nice clothes. But take off your hijab. Why would you wear a symbol of religiosity in a country that is all about secularism? According to Quran or according to Islam, the women have to hide themselves, not to signal, not to get raped. But we live in a free society. We live the hijab is mainly people in the Middle East wear the hijab because the fact that the men in the Middle East are so uncivilized that if you walk down in, not all of them, of course, I am a man from the Middle East. And I hate how when I say this, people say, oh my God, you're racist, you hate your own people. When I say this as an Arab, you should realize that it's not a racist statement because I myself am an Arab. But in Cairo, for example, Egypt, any woman that is not dressed appropriately according to the Quran gets harassed all the way as she walks. There will barely be a single man who will not harass her because Islam and the Islamic ideology and the Islamic teaching by the Imams and by the Quran has taught the Arab men or the Muslim men in Egypt, in Yemen, in these countries that women are sexual objects that should stay at home. And if they leave home and they're not dressed properly, then you should harass them. So, of course, I stand up and I say that we have to educate our men and tell them that these psychopathic verses that are read psychopathically by the Imams and all these people, that we need to stop that bullshit. And I don't care that if someone, because, I am a part of the Swedish Democrat, and the reason that I am a part of the Swedish Democrats, which is the rightist political party in Sweden, is because it is the only political party that is aware and acknowledges these problems. The leftist and even the government, the Social Democrats, they pretend that it's culture, that it's tradition. It's like it's low expectations racism. They just look at brown people and say that you are retarded, you are stupid, but it's fine, we'll take care of you. It's like, fuck no. I've said this repeatedly on Twitter and everywhere, that if you do not like the way we live in Sweden, if you do not like secularism, if you do not like the fact that Sweden is the way that it is today, not Malmö is not Swedish, but if you want to turn the rest of Sweden into Malmö, then get the fuck out of here. And I don't care if there are Swedish ethnic Swedes who do not agree with me. I believe in the secularism of Sweden, and I believe that the Swedish government is so naive and is just they want to maintain their votes. They want to keep getting votes from the leftists, from the immigrants that they're importing, and that's why they keep on playing on the circus. But they do not understand that that the Islamicization of Sweden is happening. And we need to stand up and, talk about it at least. Can we at least talk about it and criticize it? I've gotten tens of death threats since I started my YouTube channel and I started talking about all of these things. And the last death threat that I received was around 2.5 weeks ago, but it it scared me. It really, really scared me because it was on the phone and he hung up the phone quickly. He only called to recite some he said that, we're going to put you in hell soon, you fucking racist fat. And then he hung up. It wasn't like other guys who called to threaten me. And then
was this a Swedish guy, or did he speak Swedish, or was he?
I think you and I both know it was definitely not a Swedish person. It was a Muslim. He was even saying the tone of what he was saying was an Islamic, like ISIS, how ISIS says, "This is for Allah, we're gonna send you to hell, you kafir," and stuff. So he said that. So as soon as he said that, and my address is open on the internet, so they could come to me immediately and kill me. So in that moment, when I got that phone call, I just realized how serious it was, how I have been naive for such a long time. And I was just criticizing Islam on the internet, criticizing the government, saying to Muslims, accept yourself here or get the fuck out of here. But I was living in the most Muslim populated city in Malmö, and I was just putting my life at stake. So I left to Germany immediately, and I started contacting the authorities, and now I'm going to get a hidden identity so that nobody can find out where I am. Yeah.
That sounds like a good idea. I mean, I myself have received death threats from the far left. It has been mostly for the work that I've been doing. My address was doxed, and my dog got poisoned.
Oh.
So there is a lot of people who don't want people to speak out like you are doing. I mean, because I think, the left, they always have this, the racism of low expectations. They think that everyone, all people from these Middle Eastern countries, they should be this and this way. It's the racism of low expectation.
Right.
But here you come and are completely different. You're adapting to Swedish culture. And you're speaking out against what you see as these people who are not integrating into Swedish society, who are, they are keeping their culture, correct, from the Middle Eastern countries. They are bringing their culture of blasphemy laws and their views on women to Sweden, and the left is cheering this on. They are facilitating this.
They're happy about it because the left loves this. The left loves when they see brown people coming and being different. And they love that. It's like the left today is kind of like the fascists of the 1930s, the Nazis. They're exactly like them. Self-entitled, scream at you, don't want to hear you. And just if you don't agree with them, then they will use violence against you, just like they threatened you. Luckily, because I am brown, I have brown privilege, so the leftists haven't sent me death threats. They just they get shocked when they hear me talk because they're not used to a brown person telling them, Islam is shit, stop importing us. But I've gotten death threats from Islamists because I'm very outspoken about Islam, and because I was a Muslim and I know a lot about Islam. So the Islamists and the Muslim conservatives just get really triggered by me. And I've gotten a lot of threats on YouTube, on Twitter, but nothing is going to stop me. Now I'm just the only thing I'm waiting for a hidden identity so that I can, continue. But yeah.
Yeah. No, excellent. And
but about Malmö, you wanted to talk about Malmö.
Yes, I think because Malmö is the place where a lot of things have been happening. There's been a lot of bombings. I saw you tweeted out. You heard the explosions happening in Malmö, because there's a lot of people on the left saying, "Oh, it's just far-right propaganda that there is this bombings happening, or it's just small fireworks. People are just shooting fireworks or something like that." Because I've been tweeting about these bombings happening in Sweden, and there is people on Twitter saying, "Oh, you're just lying. It is far-right propaganda. It's just fireworks. It's just nothing."
I swear.
You're there. What is it like?
Malmö is gonna burn to ashes, and leftists are gonna keep on saying that it's right-wing propaganda. I was living in the center of Malmö, in literally the center of Malmö, in Triangle.
Yeah.
And during 2 weeks, I think, I heard bombs maybe 4 or 5 times. And that's the center of Malmö. In Rosengård, there were bombs all the time there. Every other week, I would have friends telling me, "Oh, there was a bomb," and then nothing gets reported about these bombs. It's like there were, during that time that I heard the bombs, only 2 were reported on Twitter. Someone wrote something about them, but then another time I heard a bomb, like a really loud voice at like 1 o'clock at night, but nobody writes about them.
No.
And and the major Swedish news media do not report, like in Triangle, there were more than like one shooting, and like right in front of the entrance of where I was living, there was a shooting, and then there was a robbery. Another guy was mugged and jumped. Like it was really like it really felt like I was living in the in the unsafest place of Malmö, because you have to understand the difference between Malmö and Stockholm. In Stockholm, the no-go zones and the segregated areas are really far away from the city. So like people in Stockholm do not see the segregation as much. But in Malmö, the segregated areas are in the middle of Malmö. So you cannot escape the segregation. You cannot escape the gangs. In front of McDonald's next to a Triangle, the police would be there all the time because there would be so many gangs, so many kids selling drugs, and just chaos all the time in front of Triangle. At some point, there would be like 8 police cars, and there was just police all the time. It really was not. It did not feel safe. But what I didn't like most about Malmö was not just seeing the police everywhere and hearing the shootings and hearing. It's like many of the shootings and bombings do not get reported. It's like Malmö has become the city where most things do not get reported, just so not to show how really bad it is. And beyond that, like most politicians and most media people in Malmö live in these really lavish, beautiful places where multiculturalism hasn't come to them yet. And I just don't know what Swedes are waiting for. What is it exactly that they want till they close their borders? Like, there's no country in the world that is as retarded and naive as Sweden when it comes to this. And I blame the media, because 90% of the news media is owned by leftists and social democrats and etc., which brainwashes people into thinking, oh, everybody in the world is beautiful and the Swedish Democrats are Nazis. It's like, and that's why like I'm onto YouTube and I'm trying to educate people and tell them they're not Nazis. Stop buying that rubbish. Anytime a white person or a Swede says anything that I'm saying, they get labeled as a racist, as a Nazi, as all of these things. So I think it's important that people like me stand up and say, fuck you and fuck your bullshit. Like, I came here to a secular, beautiful country. I came here to live freely. I came here to live in peace. It's nothing of that. It's like you've imported the Middle East with me. Of course, I'm upset, and I'm supporting the party that wants to get rid of the Middle East, in the sense of, fine, bring the food, bring the dance, bring the falafel, bring the shawarma, but do not bring Islam. Islam needs to stay in the fucking Middle East. That's my entire message. Yeah.
Yeah, no, so going back to the bombings just real quick.
Yes.
You said that there is a lot of bombings going on, but it's not being reported in the media. And that's something I have seen as well, because I have been reporting on this for several years now. And I think I'm one of the few in the world that have actually been reporting on these things that are happening. That has at least an international audience. This year, there's been over 100 bombings so far in just 6 months in Sweden. And you hear nothing about it in the media, but you are there, you're experiencing it. I mean, isn't it scary that you're afraid that there might be a hand grenade or a bomb just outside your house go off at any time? Especially considering you are talking out about these things.
Honestly, like most of the bombs happen really late at night. So the ones that I've heard as well. So I'm kind of, I come from the Middle East. I come from Yemen, and there was like a civil war happening, and I didn't hear as much bombs there. So like never throughout like 1 week I would hear bombs constantly. Sometimes like when I would hear a bomb, I would just look at myself and think like, is this like real? Is this serious? And then I would go out to my roommate and I'm like, did you just hear that? And it's like, it just makes me really feel numb and sad for Sweden. It makes me feel sad for Sweden because the main problem with Sweden is the politics, that the leftists, like for example, Ebba Busch, the leader of the Christian Democrats political party, decided to finally have lunch with the guy Jimmie Åkesson,
yeah,
that wants to close the border. Just close the borders. He doesn't want to kick anybody out. He only wants to kick just the terrorists and the rapists, which is like the lowest fucking. But anyway, so she decided, Ebba Busch, to have lunch with him, and Twitter went shit loose where the social minister started writing, "Oh my, this is so unacceptable. This is unbelievable." Annie Lööf, all the party leaders, because she sat down and had lunch with the guy that wants to close the borders after we have received 2 million refugees in the past 20 years. It's just the most sweet. This is why I'm beginning to call it Absurdistan and not Sweden, because it's just the most leftist, cultural, Marxist, retarded country. And it hurts me to see it doing this to itself. I come from a country that is a failed state, that is ruined, that is broken, that is poor. And seeing Sweden doing this to itself, it's like the Swedes are waiting until their own houses get bombed, their own, for everything about their lives to get shattered until they say, okay, fuck this shit. Now we're going to become Swedish Democrats. Fuck. It's like, it's like they wait. They're just waiting and waiting and waiting. And I do not understand why we can't just take a stance and say, close the borders. We do not need more of this. And like I said, I blame the media, and I believe that the alternative media is really important. So like there are a lot of voices on the internet that try to fight back against the mass media that just lies and covers up and does not. And there's also this website called 24 Malmö, which reports most of the violations and the robberies, because Aftonbladet, Expressen, all of these major news websites, they don't report anything about Malmö. They barely report anything. But this website, 24 Malmö, reports most of the things that happen in Malmö. Now, in one day, I biked with my friend. I biked her back to Rosengård really late at night. And because she's Swedish and I was just worried about her. So I biked her there, and I went up, we took a cigarette, and I go down and I bike back. And when I bike back, I hear bombing, right? So I call her and I tell her, hey, are you okay? Did anything happen? She was like, no, it's just like, this is common, Luai. So then she tells me about how she was like, this is not going to get reported either, because she told me that she saw by herself, because she was telling me earlier that, it's safe here. It's not that dangerous, and I'm like, okay, just shut up. But anyway, she was telling me that she saw a guy drive by. She hasn't seen anything dangerous in Rosengård, but she saw a guy drive by and shoot into an apartment. And she called the police herself, and the police told her, well, since he already shot and left, there's nothing we can do. Which is very typical of the police here. The police do not help you with anything. But anyway, so she hung up and she started going online to see on 24 Malmö if anything was reported, and nothing was reported. So like I told you, there's a lot of culture of silence about what's happening in Sweden, because they're afraid of Swedish Democrats, the Nazi political party, coming into power and kicking out terrorists and rapists.
So there's a lot of shootings happening that probably isn't even reported at all in the media.
Nope.
And it's actually quite interesting. Is politician Gustav Kasselstrand from the Alternative for Sweden party, he said that he wanted to deport migrants who commit crimes, and then he was reported by the police for hate speech.
I listened to his speech, the one that he said, and the sad part is, if any brown person, if any immigrant stood up and said every single thing that he said, nothing would have been reported. But because he's a Swede who's fighting for his country, who wants to create, who just doesn't agree with the left, and he wants to see a reversal of what's happening in his country, of course he's going to get reported for Häst mot folkgrupp. But, and what kind of law is that?
Häst mot soffgrupp.
Yeah. And what kind of law is that? I mean, the United States of America has this freedom of speech law. We don't have the same thing in Sweden. Here you have to be careful. Here you have to be careful. You can't say this. You can't say that. Like, I don't understand why we are so, like, we're so worried about people's emotions that they might get hurt if we say the wrong things about them. But the women who get raped, the houses that get bombed, the people who get shot, fuck them, you know?
Yeah, it's, I think everyone, if you're a migrant to Sweden and you come and become a member of a criminal gang or start shooting or bombing or raping, if you do that kind of stuff, then you have then you should be deported. I think it's as simple as that. I mean,
absolutely.
It doesn't matter if you are from Italy or from the Middle East or from China or Korea. If you come to Sweden and you commit crime, then you should leave. It's not racist. That's just common sense.
I'm actually a bit more, more extreme than that, in the sense that if I was the prime minister of Sweden, because like I come from the Islamic culture, I know how toxic Islam can be. What I would do is I would review, granska, like I would go through the mosque, I would set spies that go through the mosque and detect any kind of Islamic extremism. And if there's any imam or any kind of person who recruits people into Wahhabism, the extremist ideology, deport them. The Wahhabist Islamic ideology is 100% against the Swedish life and the Swedish people. They hate Sweden. They hate this country. They live on welfare because they see it as granted from God, that the kuffar are paying for us because they destroyed our countries. It's not like we destroyed our countries with this ideology, It's the Swedes who destroyed our ideology. So no, I think that Sweden should be way more conservative than the Swedish Democrats. I don't want to just deport the terrorists and the rapist. I want to report the people who are planning on destroying Sweden in the future. The Islamists, the imams that are spreading their hate and spreading Islam in its toxic form to the young, segregated Muslim people. I think we should think about the future. We shouldn't just think about, oh, you raped someone, you're out. Oh, you killed someone, you're out. No, I don't want Sweden to become an extreme Islamist Wahhabist country in the future. So, yeah.
And what's the difference between, because from Yemen, I have a friend from Bahrain.
Yeah.
And he's a Muslim, and he tells me that according to him, the bad version of Islam is the one they have in Saudi Arabia, he says. That's where they are extremists. Is he correct, or is that or is he wrong?
No, he is completely wrong. I mean, what is the good version of Islam? Where is it? Where can we find it? In Indonesia? It's like the countries that are like Turkey, for example, or Indonesia even, or Singapore, the countries that are kind of Muslim, like you have to be less Muslim to be a good country. So like if you go to Turkey, they have lost, they fight back against Islam in order to be a good country, in order to give women, like Tunisia and Morocco, they have given women for the first time ever in the Middle East, in the Arabic Islamic world, that the women get the full right of their inheritance from their family. And what did they do? They had to fight the Quran. The feminists there had to say, we're not going to read the Quran literally. If you want to read the Quran literally, go to another country. So they had to fight Islam to give women their tiny rights of getting their, full inheritance. So no, in any society, in any Muslim society, if you want to give people rights, you have to fight Islam. So like any Muslim who tells you, the problem is the interpretation, just ask them, why is the vast majority of the interpretations violent then? The vast majority of the interpretations are violent. That does not come from the people themselves. When people make the argument that the problem is not Islam, they're making a racist argument. They're saying that it's the people themselves who are retarded and low IQ and, stupid. But it's their religion that scares them, that tells them, if you read the Quran, every second verse tells you, oh, disbeliever, if you do not believe in this, you're going to burn in hell. Oh, disbeliever, if you do not follow this, you're going to shrivel in hell. Quran is not a book of religion and spirituality. It's a book of fear-mongering, of scaring you, of trying to force you to become a slave. I mean, Islam does not mean peace, like many Muslims say. Islam means submission. You have to submit yourself to the ideology. So, no, these kind of Muslims are just... They have cognitive dissonance, which means they never want to admit because they feel ashamed. They feel like they don't want to meet the facts. They're too scared. And they're scared of going to hell. So, of course, they're going to tell you, no, those are the bad Muslims. It's a very stupid argument.
Yeah. I just finished reading a book by a Norwegian journalist, very brilliant, Hege Storhaug. Mm-hmm. She has been researching a lot into mosques and extremism in Norway. Mm-hmm. One interesting thing, she wrote that there is in the Quran that there is a first part when Muhammad lived in Medina, I think it was, and then later on he lived in Mecca, and that there is a difference. In Medina it was more peaceful, but in Mecca it was more about conquering, And according to what I understood, the later verses in the Quran take precedence over the earlier verses. So if it says something peaceful in the earlier verse, but then something different later, is the later one that takes precedence. Is that correct?
That is correct, but you also need to understand that the Quran within itself, every word is the word of God. Right. So, for example, in the Medina verses, which is one of the first verses, it says that there is this very beautiful verse that says, "Oh, disbelievers, you have your religion and I have my religion. You keep your religion to yourself and I keep my religion to myself." Which is a verse that a lot of cute Muslims, that the ones that don't want to acknowledge the bad parts that come later on, they keep taking this verse and say, look at this beautiful verse. God says that this is a secular verse that tells us that religious diversity, everybody can believe what they want. And it's like, okay, beautiful, but then you flip a few chapters later, and then you find verses of violence, verses of enticement, and what scares me most is that when people come here and live in a segregated way, live in these outside of the society, not in touch with the infidels, they start reading these verses in a very aggressive way. They start reading them these people are the kuffar, they're white supremacists, they hate us. 20% of the country are Nazis, literal Nazis that want to put us in concentration camps. And it's just if someone comes to Europe and they're Muslim and they believe in the Quran to 100%, I have no doubt that if they believe in the words literally in the Quran, that they would forever live segregated and hateful of Sweden. So
yeah. Do you think that is the reason why we're seeing, because from what I've been seeing as my work as a journalist, I have seen a lot of these newly arrived migrants in Sweden. They are coming to Sweden and they are not integrating very well, most of them. Most of them are moving out into the suburbs, Rosengård, Rinkeby. They join and many of them seem to be joining these criminal gangs where they already speak the same language and culture. They have the same language, culture, and they join these gangs, and it just increases the crime in Sweden. Do you think that has to do with this, or?
Absolutely. I mean, ever since I was a kid, all I heard. I mean, you have to understand that for me, it was so much easier to integrate in Sweden because I was always able to see the other side. Being a minority that is hated within Islam opened my eyes a little bit and made me realize that, wait, God doesn't really know that much as he claims, you know? So like, why is he hating the kuffar? Why is if he hates the gay people, but he doesn't really understand that the gay people didn't choose to be gay. And he hates the kuffar, but he doesn't really know that the kuffar didn't choose to be kuffar. So it kind of ticked in my head ever since I was young that God is a little bit retarded. I mean, Allah is a little bit retarded. So for me, coming into Sweden, I've always wanted to become a part of the society and be thankful and say thank you for saving my life. But many people come as war refugees. They also blame Sweden for what's happening in their countries and come here with this self-entitlement. Not all of them, of course. Many of them are thankful. Many, especially the women, many women are very thankful because they're very compassionate and emotional. But the men, they can't speak the language. They can't make friends and the reason that they can't make friends is because immigration has been so dysfunctional for decades that to be able to be in touch with Swedish groups is so difficult. So they come here and they only have two options. One, the mosque, or two, the streets and the gangs. And you pick whatever you want. So, and in order for you to actually be in touch with the Swedish society, to be in touch with Sweden, you have to be a house where you want to make Swedish friends, you love Swedish culture, you love alcohol, you want to go party, and etc. So I don't understand why, I don't understand why Sweden didn't close its borders before 8 years ago, if not 10 years ago. But what upsets me is a lot of my critics and a lot of my haters on YouTube and Twitter always say this 24/7 to me, that if the Swedish Democrats take over, or if they took over before you came, they wouldn't have let you come into Sweden. And honestly, my reply is always, if I knew that Sweden is the way it is, I would have been happier to go to any other country, because I don't fit here. I don't fit in a country where the Swedes are angry at the immigrants, rightly so, because many immigrants are behaving like donkeys. No, not donkeys. Sorry, donkeys. A lot of immigrants just behaving this very aggressive, fuck you, we own this country, and they make it visible and they make it obvious. And I'm standing with the Nazis gladly, and I'm saying, fuck you. If you don't like this country, go back to your country.
And going back to the bombings we talked about earlier, because there has been also reported that these places in Malmö are no-go zones, but the left is saying, no, it's not a no-go zone. It's perfectly safe to go there. Is it a no-go zone? Is it that bad? Or is that more right-wing propaganda?
I would say for blonde Swedish women, it's an absolute no-go zone. And I say this, and I can't stress enough that since it is a no-go zone for blonde Swedish women, then yes, it is a no-go zone. Like I, as an Arab man who, looks Arab, when I go there, it's safer for me because, I'm a part of them. But that doesn't give me the right to say that it's safe, because other women, people in this country don't feel safe. Swedes who were born here, who their families built this country, don't feel safe here. So of course I call it a no-go zone, and there are so many no-go zones in Sweden. Like honestly, I was in the city that I lived in before Halmstad. There were 2 no-go zones there, and each one was worse than the other. And I don't understand how we've let it go so far that, I'm just so upset. It's just there's no emotion. There's no wonder that the coming generation of Swedes are so upset at this. I always talk with young Swedes, and my videos on YouTube, especially the first videos, they were funny and kind of ridiculous in some kind of way, because I'm trying to reach out to the younger generation, because the younger generation is whom I have hope for, because the older generation has fucked everything up. They've just ruined so much that can't be unruined. So I'm actually hopeful for the future generations to fix what these retarded leftists and cultural Marxists have done. Because the coming generation, they see everything around them. They're growing in the new Sweden, and they're being reminded of the old Sweden through old pictures, old videos, and things like that. And I'm standing by their side, and I'm telling them, because like a lot of people at the extreme right, so like NMR, they say things like, oh, they're waiting for a race war, that the race war would happen. But like, I'm fighting that. I don't want there to be a race war, because it's not about color. It's about culture and ideology. And so many immigrants, I mean, more than 12% of Swedish Democrat voters are immigrants like myself, because we are aware that the people who come here also are destructive, and they're more destructive to us than to the Swedes, because they're ruining us more than anybody. We're the ones who it becomes harder for us to become a part of the society because of them. So of course we are more upset at them than the Swedes themselves. So yeah.
Because you came from Yemen as ex-Muslim, a gay ex-Muslim. You come to Sweden, you want to get away from that, but then you come to Malmö, and it's the same or worse.
Yeah, it's definitely worse. I would say, like, I don't feel safe as it, like, I can't hold, for example, my partner's hand if there are, immigrants around or Arabs. Like in Halmstad, somewhere. I remember, like, I was sitting in a restaurant, and I talked about this in one of my videos. I was sitting in the restaurant with my ex-boyfriend, and I don't like showing public affection because, I'm a conservative Arab, so like showing public affection as a gay guy, I'm just not comfortable with it that much. And I wasn't comfortable that much with it before. So I was sitting with my boyfriend, and he took my hand and started holding my hand. And I was very self-conscious of it. It was the first time that I ever showed public affection. So he was holding my hand. So I just stared at the door and started noticing people coming in. And I'm like, just waiting for their reaction. Like, are they going to stare? I was just like a bit panicking. So Swedes kept walking in, and no one looked at me. Swedes don't look at you. It's amazing. Like, it's one of the best things about the Swedes is that they mind their own business. So they kept walking and acting like I don't exist, which is amazing and a blessing. And then suddenly a group of Arabs, a gang, came in, and the first thing they see and they fixate on is me and my boyfriend holding our hands. They all were staring at me and my boyfriend like they wanted to jump on me and like beat me up, me and my boyfriend. And I just looked at them, and at first I was kind of like scared, but then I just looked at them and I almost smiled a little bit. It's like, fuck you, you're here. What do you think that, but it also pisses them off that, because I'm an Arab. If I was a Swede, it would have been a bit different because they see me as a race traitor. But I think Sweden has completely failed at, they usually say that Sweden is so tolerant that it tolerates brown people's intolerance, just not to get called racist. And I think that is the worst thing that we could do to the immigrants here. Hanif Bali said in the Hurkanvi conversation once. Hurkanvi is a podcast that arranges conferences sometimes, and he said in one of them that we're applying racist policies that they used in America in the 1930s in Sweden today. But Sweden assumes that because it's so liberal and so, accepting and loves all cultures, that it's that Sweden is gonna become a beautiful melting pot, and people are gonna live in harmony. But Islam can never be integrated into the Swedish society because it's completely opposite of the Swedish society. You can't drink. Swedes drink all the time. You can't have sex. You get killed for it. Swedes have sex all the time and they love it. You can't, it comes into the most basic parts of living. So of course it can't be integrated. You live in isolation, in segregation. There are a few Muslims who end up getting integrated well into the society. Good for you. You're either really secular, or you ended up in the right place in the right time. But the bombings, the shootings, the sexual harassments, the insecurity that many people live off, it is also a product of this mass immigration coupled with Islamic extremism, coupled with people who just view everything as racism and become radicalized. And the only two roads that they have is either the streets or the mosque, which both cannot lead to a good result.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. There is a lot of bad situations that is going to happen in Sweden in the future if this leftists don't stop, and if they don't start doing anything, because I think the situation is getting worse and worse in Sweden every year, and I think it's just going to continue if they don't do anything to stop it. And they always call everyone that wants to do something, they're always Nazi, racist, all that stuff. So it's I think it's hard, because one thing I don't know about Swedish people is that a lot of Swedish people are very obedient. They follow the law. They are very obedient to the state all the time. They don't like being called names, and they're very similar to Germans. Sweden and Germans are very similar people. They follow the state. They follow the laws. They do everything properly, if you understand what I mean. So I think that is a problem. I think that is one of the reasons why Sweden is so politically correct, and they are not doing anything with it. And until it is too late, I think I think that is the big problem. I have one question, by the way, from a guy in the chat here. He asks if you are a fan of Milo Yiannopoulos, because people are saying that you are the Milo from Yemen. Yemen Milo.
I actually like Milo. I think he's more of an entertainer and a comedian than he is, a serious political commentator. But I don't like that Milo. Like in one of his videos, he's kind of, I wouldn't say extreme, but he once said that all Muslims are I don't want these terrorists, there's terrorists. And I believe this kind of, these terrorists, focusing on terrorists is like focusing on, talking about Swedish Democrats as Nazis and Nazis. It's not true, because not all Muslims are terrorists, but Muslims have a different mentality when it comes to women, when it comes to minorities, and these things we have to discuss and talk about. But when it comes to terrorism, it's just fear mongering. And I do I look up to other individuals. I don't like the new wave of Milo, Ben Shapiro, Jordan Peterson. I think I'm not a big fan. I'm more into the traditional, Christopher Hitchens is one of my favorites. Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, the old wave of intellectuals who are kind of preaching secularism, but not going crazy and being a retarded leftist. But also they were very critical of Islam. They were not apologetic about Islam. And they were very intellectually smart about criticizing Islam. Milo and other intellectuals, they just say, oh, terrorist, rapist. But we need new ways to be able to speak to Muslims. And some of the ways that Milo speaks to Muslims, in one of his, he's funny, he's hilarious, but to many Muslims, it radicalizes them, or not radicalizes them. It's just a bit of a put off. And I do believe that we need other, Milo is not a perfect speaker against Muslims, because he does not know much about Muslims. I've seen some of the videos, but I mean, I do like that he exists, and that the gays have, a conservative speaker who can, who can speak for them and show that not all, gay people are retarded leftists. And
And I've got a question here, by the way, another one, if you don't mind, from Lorraine with a super chat. Thank you so much. Asks if Luai, can you get asylum in another country?
Absolutely. And remember, you just said that Swedes are obedient and blah blah blah. All of my Swedish friends, the Swedish Democrats and the leftists, no, not the leftists, but all of my Swedish friends always tell me, "You're Swedish. You're so Swedish, Luai. You're Swedish. You're Swedish." And I say, no, I'm not Swedish. I'm assimilating, but I'm not Swedish. But one of the reasons that make me say I'm not Swedish is I'm very, disobedient, in the sense that I don't trust the government. I don't trust the state. I don't trust the media. I never did that in Yemen, and I'm not doing it here after I realized what they're doing to Sweden. After I went through the integrational plan and saw that they're not integrating us, they're just leaving us exactly just like we came. And I realized that, I'm coming with the Middle East, and I lost all trust to the government. And, I'm actually, waiting for my citizenship, because I've been here for 5 years now. I speak Swedish. I have worked for 4 years. I have never committed a crime. The only crime that I committed is I speak up against the government online, and I say that, and I've been contacted by people saying that, you might not get the citizenship because, you are a threat to, because you're a refugee yourself, and you're saying that Sweden should not take a, they hate you. They're not going to give you the citizenship. And I've even dedicated a video to the Swedish intelligence on my channel, because I don't give a shit. And if the Swedish government does not give me citizenship, or I feel under so much threat that I can no longer stay in Sweden, then I can actually seek asylum in Norway or Denmark or any other country. And I've had so many threats that I actually can be granted asylum in another country. But I give Sweden the benefit of the doubt that they believe in freedom of speech, and that they would grant me, they're giving terrorists the Swedish citizen. The fact that they wouldn't give someone a Swedish citizen just because he's a right-winger and he criticizes their insanity. I have said that I wouldn't be proud of becoming a Swedish citizen if the Swedish government is not going to give me it because of freedom of speech, if you understand what I mean.
It might be a different story if you're saying things they don't like. Maybe they don't like you that much. Yeah. That might be a bit different. That might be a bit different from these people who are returning from Syria, and you're dangerous speaking.
Yeah. I do realize that what I'm doing is kind of it's because when I speak to leftists, they don't know what to say to me. They don't have a single argument against me, because I am the epitome of what they thought didn't exist. A refugee, LGBT person who just came, who learned the language, who's working, who has integrated. They would love to take me and be like, look, this is a perfect version of the people who came here. I am the example that they would want to present as someone who's assimilated, learned the language quickly, works, etc., etc. But I'm standing up and I'm saying, nope, you are retarded in every single way, shape, or form. And Sweden had to close its borders. Sweden should have closed its borders a long time ago. I've had a problem, it was so difficult for me integrating because of your stupid policies. And I don't know when we're going to stop, when is Sweden going to stop when it closes its border after we have 15 million Muslims that have come in? What is the tipping point? When do we close the borders? Because are we just going to keep the border open? There are 64 million refugees in the world. Should they all come to Sweden? They tell you that, Sweden is a rich country.
She wanted 30 million more migrants, I think, to Sweden, she once said.
Yeah, 30 million. And Annie Lööf is supporting and backing up around 9,000 Afghanistan that lied about their identity. I look I'm a bit racially ambiguous. People cannot tell if I'm an Arab or if I'm an Afghanistani, or if I'm, some people think I'm from India. Other people think I'm from Argentina. I'm very racially ambiguous. But some people assume that I'm Afghanistani. And the people who think that I'm Afghanistani always are very suspicious about my age, because, Afghanistani people have lied about their age and stuff like that. And it's just so funny. I no longer call myself a refugee, or, if they say, what are you doing here? How did you come here? I don't say I'm a refugee, because the word refugee has been destroyed. If you say you're a refugee, then people are like, What? And they're right. They're absolutely right. Many refugees lie about their identity. The refugee convention that the United Nations created, it no longer applies today. Because not with the Swedes, how naive they have been, where they believe every single word. I know a girl, when I went to apply for asylum, I had a case, like a large case, and I was ready. I had so many things to say. And then a girl that I know goes in, she faked a death letter to herself, and she got in, accepted and everything. Meanwhile, there are so many people who are actually LGBT refugees, Muslim critics. Like the list is, and these people would work properly with their morals under the Swedish society. They're the perfect refugees that Sweden should be getting. But nope, Sweden just says, opens her legs and anybody can come in. And now it's facing its consequences.
Yeah, so what do you think will be happening in Sweden in the future, next 5, 10, 15, 20 years? What do you think? Will it get worse and worse, or will it stop, or will it start to integrate? What do you think will happen?
That's a very hard question. You can't forecast the future. I know that you suspect. I've read an article of you once suspecting that Sweden's future is going to be like Lebanon, like the civil war and everything. And I think like it's so complicated. Sweden, if there would be a civil war in Sweden, it would be something that has never been seen before, because you have the Albanian mosques, you have the Iraqi mosques who are completely against each other and hate each other. You have the gangs, you have the Nazis, you have the white supremacists, you have the alternative right. There are so many different multicultural elements that you can't really predict how the future is going to look like. But what I do predict is that if we keep on, if Sweden's legs stay open and we keep receiving people, then the spending i luften, the tension in the air is going to keep rising and rising and rising and rising until Swedish people just get done with it. But I hope it doesn't reach that point where there's so much tension in the air, so much hate, and so much like confusion that we reach that moment. I hope that we reach a point where the politicians stop throwing shit at each other, because they represent us. They're supposed to be open and talk to each other and, not calling each other Nazis and, whatever. It's just like as an immigrant, when I hear the leftists call the leader of my political party, or just the right-wing political party, a Nazi, it makes me, I hate them. I hate the leftists because they're trying to convince me something that is not real. I go to the Swedish Democrats meetings. I've worked with Swedish Democrats. Half of the population wants Swedish Democrats' policies, but they're scared of voting for them. Why are they trying? And that's my first Swedish video and second Swedish video was about this, is that you're trying to create this feeling of Nazism that does not exist. The Swedish people is the least racist Western society that exists. It is a society that continued to vote for leftist policies and let people come in, even though they have seen it slowly damaging their country. But they were so selfless and said, no, we're a rich country, fuck that. But now we're in a different climate, and Swedes have to think about their country and about their future and about their values and how they should preserve it and forget the idea of multiculturalism.
Yeah, no, I think we will see in Sweden, unless something is done. I think it will be a boiling point where people have had enough in the future. Unfortunately, I think we have to work to try and prevent that.
Yeah.
Try and make the politicians see sense to start doing things to stop this from happening.
Right.
To start doing proper integration and stopping the crimes, the gang crimes and the bombings, all these things. Otherwise, I think it might unfortunately go the wrong way, which we don't want, of course. So I think there's a lot of things to be done in Sweden in the future to make things right, but I'm not sure that they will be doing these right things unless at least the Swedish Democrats come into power. Otherwise, I'm not going to see the socialists doing any of this stuff.
Yeah, but you know, I also I have. I do think that, like, even if the Swedish Democrats come into power, you still have the moderates and the Christian Democrats who are just retarded. Like, with the way that Sweden looks right now, these two parties, the moderates and the Christian Democrats, they're leftist political parties. They do not see the problems. There are politicians in there that are Swedish Democrats that have the same view, but the rest don't want to close the borders. So it's going to be really hard for the Swedish Democrats, even when they take over, to do that. So I have said this in one of my videos, but I hope that Gustav Kasselson, so like Alternative for Sweden, does come into the Riksdagen so that they can stir up the pot, so that people stop calling SD racist and Nazis and start calling Alternative for Sverige racist and Nazis. Maybe then SD will have like a leverage and start återvandring and start like sending, you know, the people who don't want to, you know, because right now SD has this so much negative power on it. And I don't think that Alternative for Sverige are Nazis or racist or whatever. But I know that when they come into the parliament, because if you go to the meetings that they have, like when the leftists and they come and are like, yeah, racist, blah, blah. Like when they come and like scream at the Alternative for Sverige, you see their veins popping out. They really think they're screaming at Hitler, you know? So when Alternative for Sverige comes in the government, then people will stop calling SD racist. They will still call them racist, but it will not look very legitimate because we'll have, oh, here comes the real racists, you know, the Alternative for Sverige. And I think that will bring a bit of a balanced view of what, you know, because Alternative for Sverige will be the new Swedish Democrats, if that makes any sense. And then Swedish Democrats will be able to, you know, actually do something and not have the Christian Democrats and the moderates, you know, choking them. Like, I mean, even, so.
Yeah. No, I think if the Alternative for Sweden comes into parliament, that's going to be a big change. They're going to push the narrative a lot, I think, which is, I think would be good for the debate in Sweden.
Oh, definitely.
Absolutely. What do you think? We've been going about an hour here now. Do you want to wrap this up, or do you have anything more you want to talk about?
No, I think I spoke enough. Thank you for having me on your channel, and I like the flag that's behind you. When I get to my place soon, when I run away from Malmö, which is very soon, like in the coming few days, I'm gonna have because I was in Germany, by the way. But then I came back now to Malmö just to pick up my things, and I'm going to run up. But like, hopefully when I get up into my place, I'm going to have a flag that is as beautiful as the one behind you in my room.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. Yeah, it's a very nice flag, and I'm glad you like it. And you have to get one. They're I think they're quite cheap. So you get one and put up on the wall. Excellent. Yeah, no, thank you so much for coming on and talking about these issues in Sweden, and it would be great to have you back on another time if you want. And
absolutely, no problem.
Yeah, it's been very nice having you here, and you have a good night, and I wish all my viewers have a good night as well. And
thank you for watching.
Yes, and make sure to go and follow. I'll leave links in the description so you can follow Luai on his
YouTube and on Twitter.
Yes, YouTube and Twitter. Yeah, I'll leave the links so you can go find him. Make sure to go and follow him and subscribe to him.
All right. Thank you. Have a great night.
Excellent. Good night, everyone.